Question 1. During a quantitative risk analysis, the team uses a decision tree to evaluate two possible pathways for system integration. What must be calculated for each branch of the decision tree to determine the optimal strategic choice? A. Expected monetary value, EMV. B. To complete performance index, TCPI. C. Variance at completion, VAC. D. Standard deviation, $/sigma $. Answer A. Expected monetary value, EMV. A decision tree is a quantitative analysis tool used to evaluate complex strategic choices under uncertainty. To determine the best pathway, the financial consequence of each outcome, path, is multiplied by its probability, and the results are summed to calculate the expected monetary value, EMV. The optimal choice is the branch with the highest positive EMV. Question 2. A project team identifies a high-impact threat that they cannot eliminate but can significantly reduce the probability of occurrence by implementing additional testing procedures. However, these procedures create a minor new risk related to delayed schedule reviews. The planned delay is an example of which type of risk? A. Residual risk. B. Unknown unknown. C. Secondary risk. D. Contingency risk. Answer C. Secondary risk. A secondary risk is a new risk that arises directly as a result of implementing a response to a primary risk. The original threat's probability was reduced, mitigation, but the implementation of the response, extra testing, inadvertently created a new, minor threat, delayed schedule reviews. Question 3. The project manager implements a continuous risk monitoring policy where certain low-priority threats are not actively responded to but are kept on a watch list. What is the status of the budget contingency allocated for these low-priority threats? A. They are covered by the management reserve. B. They are included in the overall project cost baseline. C. No reserve is allocated as the risk is low priority. D. They are funded via the schedule contingency. Answer B. They are included in the overall project cost baseline. Low priority, known risks that are passively accepted are still part of the project's identified uncertainty. The budget allocated to cover the potential impact of all known risks, threats and opportunities, is the contingency reserve, which is formally included as part of the total project cost baseline. Question 4. In a predictive environment, a project manager develops a detailed contingency plan for a known unknown risk, e.g., specific regulatory approval delay. This plan outlines specific actions to be implemented only if the risk event occurs. This response strategy is A. Passive acceptance. B. Avoidance. C. Active acceptance. D. Exploit. Answer C. Active acceptance. Risk acceptance involves choosing not to change the project plan immediately regarding the risk. Since the project manager develops a detailed contingency plan, a proactive plan to be executed if the event happens, this is defined as active acceptance, as resources are set aside and a response is prepared. Question 5. The project team identifies a risk related to potential staff burnout due to project duration. The team decides to add mandatory rotating time off and backfill staffing positions. This response is an example of what type of risk strategy? A. Avoidance. B. Transfer. C. Mitigation. D. Exploit. Answer C. Mitigation. Mitigation is the strategy of taking proactive steps to reduce the probability or impact of a threat to an acceptable level. Adding mandatory time off and backfilling positions is a deliberate action taken before the burnout occurs to reduce the probability and impact of the staff burnout threat. Question 6. The project team is using Monte Carlo analysis to assess schedule risk. The final output of this technique is most valuable for A. Calculating the definitive estimate at completion, EAC. B. Determining the specific dates on the critical path. C. Quantifying the probability of project completion by a specific date. D. Ranking risks based on their qualitative impact score. Answer C. Quantifying the probability of project completion by a specific date. Monte Carlo analysis is a statistical simulation used in quantitative risk analysis. It runs thousands of scenarios to determine the probability distribution of potential outcomes, cost or schedule, providing a key measurement of the likelihood that the project will meet key milestones or the final deadline. Question 7. Which element of the project management plan is crucial for defining the project manager's approach to conducting risk reviews, audits and tracking identified risks. A. Stakeholder engagement plan. B. Configuration management plan. C. Risk management plan. D. Quality management plan. Answer: C. Risk management plan. The risk management plan is the subsidiary plan that defines how risk management activities will be performed throughout the project. This includes defining the roles, methodologies, risk categories, and, importantly, the specific processes for conducting risk audits and monitoring reviews. Question 8. A project manager identifies an opportunity, positive risk, that could significantly improve the final product's performance. The team decides to integrate external resources to jointly pursue the opportunity with a partner. This response strategy is known as A. Exploit, B. Enhance, C. Share, D. Accept. Answer: C. Share. Share is a positive risk response strategy opportunity where the project team teams up with a third party to gain the benefits of the opportunity. Since the external resources are integrated to jointly pursue the benefit, the risk and reward are shared with the partner. Question 9. In an Agile context, uncertainty regarding market requirements is best handled by implementing which response? A. Formal risk audits twice per iteration. B. Fixed scope management and a strict change control board. C. Frequent stakeholder feedback and iterative delivery cycles. D. Transferring the cost of rework to the customer via contracts. Answer: C. Frequent stakeholder feedback and iterative delivery cycles. In Agile, the inherent uncertainty of market requirements is best managed by minimizing the distance between delivery and feedback. Frequent stakeholder collaboration and delivering usable increments iteratively allows the team to inspect and adapt the solution based on the latest market learning, thus reducing the risk associated with requirement shifts. Question 10. A risk analysis identifies a threat that could severely damage the product but is highly unlikely to occur, 2% probability. The team decides not to develop a contingency plan but notes the risk in the register. Which response strategy is this? A. Avoidance. B. Passive acceptance. C. Mitigation. D. Active acceptance. Answer: B. Passive acceptance. Passive acceptance means acknowledging the existence of the threat but choosing to take no proactive action, neither developing a contingency plan nor allocating specific budget. The team simply accepts that if the threat occurs, the project will deal with the consequences later, which is appropriate for low probability, low priority risks. Question 11. When performing a qualitative risk analysis, the probability and impact matrix is used to A. Calculate the expected monetary value (EMV) for each risk. B. Determine which risks require immediate response planning. C. Establish the contingency reserve amount for the project. D. Simulate schedule outcomes based on risk events. Answer: B. Determine which risks require immediate response planning. Qualitative risk analysis uses the P/and I matrix to prioritize risks subjectively based on their likelihood and consequences, high, medium, low. This categorization process is crucial for screening risks and determining which high risks require detailed quantitative analysis and immediate response planning. Question 12. A project manager is determining the required resource contingency needed for all known risks. This resource calculation will become part of which formal project document? A. A management reserve documentation. B. Risk management plan updates. C. Cost baseline. D. Project charter. Answer: C. Cost baseline. The budget allocated for known risks, the contingency reserve, is formally added to the estimated costs of the work packages. The sum of the work package estimates and the contingency reserve constitutes the total cost baseline, the approved budget against which project cost performance is measured. Question 13. Which concept is primarily focused on reducing the consequences of uncertainty by increasing the availability of options and pathways within the project scope? A. Risk avoidance. B. Fallback planning. C. Opportunity enhancement. D. Resilience. Answer: D. Resilience. Resilience is a core principle in the uncertainty performance domain, focusing on building adaptability and robustness into the project approach and product design. It aims to increase the system's ability to recover from setbacks or adjust to new situations by increasing the number of available choices or buffers. Question 14. The project manager identifies a potential new risk during project execution. Before updating the risk register, The project manager should first use which process step? A. Initiate integrated change control. B. Determine the root cause of the risk. C. Assess the risk's probability and impact. D. Submit the risk to the Change Control Board, CCB. Answer: C. Assess the risk's probability and impact. The first step when facing a new risk is always identification, followed immediately by analysis. The project manager must assess the risk's likelihood and potential consequence, probability and impact, to correctly prioritize it before documenting it and moving on to response planning or change control. Question 15. A project manager decides to use a fixed-price contract for a high-risk technical component. This is an example of which risk response strategy for the buyer? A. Avoidance. B. Mitigation. C. Transfer. D. Acceptance. Answer: C. Transfer. By engaging a seller under a fixed-price contract, the buyer formally shifts the financial risk associated with cost overruns and technical complexity to the seller. This procurement decision acts as a risk transfer mechanism. Question 16. In an iterative project, the team defines an experiment to test a new technology implementation, specifically to reduce the uncertainty surrounding that technology. This experiment is an example of managing uncertainty by focusing on A. Risk transfer. B. Architectural resilience. C. Gaining knowledge. D. Active acceptance. Answer: C. Gaining knowledge. In adaptive projects, one way to manage uncertainty is through proactive learning. Conducting an experiment or a proof of concept is a deliberate investment in gaining the necessary knowledge to reduce technical uncertainty, which is a key response to dealing with ambiguity and complexity. Question 17. The project manager decides to delete a high-risk optional feature from the scope before development begins to ensure the project meets its schedule baseline. This is an example of which risk response strategy? A. Mitigation. B. Avoidance. C. Exploit. D. Enhance. Answer: B. Avoidance. Avoidance is the strategy of eliminating the threat entirely, often by changing the project plan, removing the scope, or altering the objectives. Deleting the optional feature ensures the project avoids the high risk associated with its development. Question 18. What is the key measurement provided by sensitivity analysis, e.g., tornado diagram? A. The total forecasted cost of the project including reserves. B. The correlation between critical schedule outcomes and risk probability. C. The degree to which the uncertainty of each element impacts the project objective. D. The expected value of all strategic alternatives in a decision tree. Answer: C. The degree to which the uncertainty of each element impacts the project objective. Sensitivity analysis, often visualized as a tornado diagram, helps the project manager determine which specific risk elements, e.g., variables like labor cost or delivery time, have the largest potential influence on the project objective, e.g., total cost or finish date. This ranks the risks based on their measured impact, regardless of their probability. Question 19. A key assumption made during resource planning is found to be incorrect, potentially invalidating the schedule. This situation is best categorized as a risk that originated from A. Ambiguity. B. Volatility. C. A constraint being breached. D. An unknown unknown. Answer: A. Ambiguity. Ambiguity refers to uncertainty arising from a lack of clarity regarding future work, requirements, or dependencies, often resulting in flawed assumptions, e.g., assuming a resource would be available. When a planning assumption is proven wrong, the risk originated from that lack of clarity or ambiguity during the planning phase. Question 20. The project manager sets aside a portion of the budget to fund potential changes resulting from project scope being defined through rolling wave planning. This budget is known as A. A management reserve. B. Schedule reserve. C. Contingency reserve. D. Product backlog reserve. Answer: C. Contingency reserve. Rolling wave planning, which leaves future scope intentionally undefined, creates known unknown risks. We know there will be requirements variance and subsequent work changes. The contingency reserve is the appropriate budget to set aside to cover the cost impact of these identified, expected variances. Question 21. When integrating risk management into procurement, what is the primary purpose of a fixed price incentive fee, FPIF, contract for the buyer? A. To transfer all risk to the seller, maximizing certainty. B. To incentivize the seller to control costs while sharing a portion of the risk. C. To avoid the risk of cost overruns entirely. D. To accept the risk and fund it via management reserve. Answer B. To incentivize the seller to control costs while sharing a portion of the risk. An FPIF contract shares the cost risk between the buyer and seller. It motivates the seller to be efficient, incentive fee, while protecting the buyer with a ceiling price, fixed price element, creating a balance where both parties share both the responsibility and the consequences of the cost performance. Question 22. In the context of dealing with high levels of volatility, what is the most appropriate planning technique to manage schedule uncertainty? A. Critical path method, CPM, with zero float. B. Defining the schedule using buffers, critical chain method. C. Sequencing all activities using finish to start logic. D. Implementing a strictly fixed schedule baseline. Answer B. Defining the schedule using buffers, critical chain method. Volatility refers to the tendency of actual performance to vary greatly from the estimate. The critical chain method, CCM, manages this uncertainty by eliminating individual task floats and placing explicit project buffers at the end of the chain, protecting the schedule from common schedule variations. Question 23. A project manager uses a reserve analysis technique. Which level of reserve is explicitly excluded from the cost baseline? A. Activity reserve. B. Contingency reserve. C. Management reserve. D. Schedule reserve. Answer C. Management reserve. The cost baseline is composed of the work package estimates, the activity cost estimates, and the contingency reserve. The management reserve, which is for unknown risks, is added after the cost baseline is determined and is not part of the baseline itself. Question 24. A team decides to use prototyping and experimentation during execution to test new technology options. This approach is a strategic response to managing which characteristic of uncertainty? A. Volatility. B. Ambiguity. C. Complexity. D. Risk. Answer B. Ambiguity. Ambiguity arises when the path forward or the solution is unclear, e.g., which technology works best. Prototyping and experimentation are active learning strategies specifically designed to reduce ambiguity by generating knowledge and validating potential solutions before making a final commitment. Question 25. A project manager calculates the sum of all positive expected monetary values, EMVs, for the identified opportunities. What should this sum be used to offset? A. The management reserve. B. The negative EMVs for threats. C. The contingency reserve for threats. D. The total project budget. Answer C. The contingency reserve for threats. The positive EMV sum represents the expected financial gain from opportunities. This amount is commonly used to offset or reduce the amount of the contingency reserve that must be set aside for negative risks, threats, balancing the overall financial uncertainty of the project. Question 26. When is the ideal time to perform risk identification and analysis in an adaptive, agile life cycle? A. Only during the initial release planning phase. B. Continuously integrated into daily work and iteration planning. C. Only before the first iteration begins. D. Only when a significant deviation from the baseline occurs. Answer B. Continuously integrated into daily work and iteration planning. In adaptive environments, risk management is integrated into the rhythm of the project. Risk identification, analysis, and response planning are performed continuously, particularly during iteration planning, refinement, and daily stand-ups, to ensure rapid adaptation to emerging threats and opportunities. Question 27. The project manager implements an organizational policy requiring all project managers to include a 15% buffer at the end of every project schedule. This organization is utilizing a concept derived from which scheduling method? A. Critical path method, CPM. B. Precedence diagramming method, PDM. C. Critical chain method, CCM. D. Resource leveling. Answer C. Critical chain method, CCM. The critical chain method, CCM, explicitly removes float from individual tasks and aggregates these schedule buffers into central reserves, feeding buffers at merge points, and a project buffer at the end. Mandating a buffer at the end of the schedule is a core principle of CCM to protect the project from volatility. Question 28. Which of the following is considered an acceptable response strategy for a negative risk threat? A. Exploit. B. Share. C. Enhance. D. Accept. Answer D. Accept. Accept is one of the 4 main response strategies for threats: avoid, mitigate, transfer, accept. Acceptance means choosing to deal with the consequences of the threat if and when it occurs, without proactive action to change its impact or probability. Question 29. A project manager uses a simulation to model the impact of delayed resource availability, material cost fluctuations, and regulatory changes on the final project cost and deadline. This technique is known as A. Root cause analysis. B. Decision tree analysis. C. Contingency planning. D. Monte Carlo analysis. Answer D. Monte Carlo analysis. Monte Carlo analysis is the quantitative technique used to model the simultaneous impact of multiple external and internal uncertainties on the project's key objectives, cost and schedule. It provides a probability range for the final outcome. Question 30. When a project manager is analyzing complexity, what is a key indicator of high complexity? A. The lack of available risk management software. B. High number of interdependencies between project tasks. C. The project manager's lack of experience with the project type. D. The absence of an organizational PMO. Answer B. High number of interdependencies between project tasks. Complexity is inherent in the project structure itself. A high number of connections, relationships, and interdependencies among team members, stakeholders, or technical components significantly increases the project's complexity, making the final outcome harder to predict and manage. Question 31. The project manager uses expert judgment to estimate a task's optimistic O, pessimistic P, and most likely M, durations. What is the fundamental type of uncertainty being addressed by this technique? A. Complexity. B. Ambiguity. C. Estimating uncertainty variability. D. Volatility. Answer C. Estimating uncertainty variability. Variability refers to the uncertainty surrounding the estimated time or cost of planned activities. Using 3-point estimates, OMP, and calculating the expected duration addresses this specific type of uncertainty by quantifying the range and distribution of possible outcomes for a single task. Question 32. In a hybrid project, the initial detailed scope is defined for the first 6 months, while the scope for the remaining 18 months is kept at a high level. This approach increases the need for which type of risk response strategy during the execution phase? A. Avoidance. B. Contingency planning. C. Exploit. D. Transfer. Answer B. Contingency planning. Keeping the future scope at a high level, rolling wave planning, intentionally introduces known unknown risks, specifically scope variance and technical uncertainty for those later phases. Since the risk is known but not yet fully defined, the project must rely heavily on contingency planning, active acceptance, to manage the costs and schedule impacts when the details emerge. Question 33. Which risk management process is performed when an accepted risk event actually occurs? A. Perform integrated change control. B. Implement contingency response. C. Monitor and control project work. D. Update the risk register with closure details. Answer B. Implement contingency response. When an accepted plan for risk event materializes, such as a delivery delay, the predefined contingency plan must be executed. This action, known as implement contingency response, ensures the project has a controlled, timely reaction to the realized risk. Question 34. A project manager calculates the To-Complete Performance Index, TCPI, to meet the EAC as 0.80. What does this measurement primarily indicate? A. The project is already ahead of schedule. B. The remaining work must be completed with 80% efficiency. C. The remaining budget is highly sufficient for the remaining work. D. The project will certainly fail to meet the EAC. Answer C. The remaining budget is highly sufficient for the remaining work. TCPI measures the required efficiency. A TCPI less than 1.0, 0.80, means the remaining work must be performed at less than 100% efficiency. This indicates that the remaining budget is generous, and meeting the EAC goal is relatively easy. Question 35. When managing a complex project, The project manager uses the risk breakdown structure, RBS. What is the primary benefit of the RBS? A. To prioritize risks based on their calculated EMV. B. To systematically ensure all possible sources of risk are considered during identification. C. To define the organizational structure for the risk management team. D. To track the project's overall contingency reserve usage. Answer: B. To systematically ensure all possible sources of risk are considered during identification. The risk breakdown structure, RBS, is a hierarchical structure that categorizes potential risk sources, e.g., technical, external, organizational. Its primary value in planning is to serve as a checklist and framework during risk identification, ensuring that the team systematically and thoroughly addresses all major areas of uncertainty.